Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the 40k Fireside podcast. I'm David Gaylard, and I'm joined by my good friend Vik Vijay. Together, we discuss 40k and the meta from our perspective, along with events we've recently been to and those that have got coming up. So come on down to the fireside and listen.
And welcome back, everyone, to episode 17 of 40k Fireside. And today is a very special episode because we've got Dave here on the back of a victory at another Super Major, and this is his third Super Major that he's won, which is the most of any player in the United Kingdom. And yeah, massive congratulations to Dave. He took first place at the Southampton GT with his Astra Militarum list, and this episode is going to be absolutely focused on his matchups, his tactics, his ideas on his list development, and we're going to look at a Super Major run from kind of the start to finish. And yeah, I'm really excited to ask questions as well on this one. So congratulations, Dave, and welcome.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, it's been a wonderful. Obviously, it's been a wonderful weekend. But I also won the golden ticket, as they call it, the ticket to the World Championships, paid for, which will be great if I can go. But yeah, most importantly, I overcame some personal goals that weekend, which were really nice to see.
Yeah, so, absolutely. And that's specifically related to the finals game, which we will go through in this, because I think that's a very important game that a lot of people want to know about, where you played against Cheema's Dark Angels, and that Astra Militarum versus Dark Angels game, played by two very high-level players, is probably one of the most interesting things that has happened in competitive 40k so far this season. So we'll definitely touch on that for a good amount of time.
Yeah. Should I run through my list, what I brought?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Let's jump straight into it. So what did you bring to the event, Dave?
Yeah, so if you've listened to the previous episode, Vic and I went on a bit of a deep dive in terms of my list building from start to finish with Astra Militarum, and I still am very convinced of the fact that the book is very deep and there are a lot of options. In so much that I had two practice games against Dark Angels on the Friday night, Saturday night, and the Sunday night. Played against my teammate Yokul, playing Dark Angels, and I played against Pumba, the judge from UKTC, WTC, captain for Team Poland, and so that really helped me prepare and tweak my list for the tournament, because I knew, and everyone of course knew, that Cheema was playing Dark Angels, and Dark Angels are probably the most popular and strongest army in the game. So this is actually my first tournament to date that I've ever fully ticked the last 150, 200 points towards a certain matchup, and made a lot of decision points based on that. So it's nice that it's paid off this time. But anyway, the list is Lord Solar Leontis with 5-up regain a CP. I've got the Deathcore Marshal, which is a 35-point 2-regimental order officer. I've got a tank commander with plasma. All my tanks have plasma turrets, but the tank commander has 2 plasma sponsons and the las cannon. And then I've got the KD command squad with the Ogren bodyguard, and he only has the 2-up save. He doesn't have them all because I quite literally did not have 5 points to upgrade. And then I had 4 units of 10 KD shock troops, 1 melter, 1 plasma gun, and then I had 30 Kassakin. Now, there is a lot of nuance in how you load out your Kassakin, and I didn't actually end up getting it right. That would be the one tweak I would make in the list. Mm-hmm. But I had 1 with ignore cover, 1 with mechanized infantry, and I had 1 with ignore heavy penalty, and +1 strength in combat, I think. But ignore heavy penalty, brutal strength. And my unit that I have the Barbican key on is the ignore heavy penalty, and I played all of the hot shotguns on that unit so I could get the maximum number of shots to have the maximum number of mortal wounds when I split 3 targets. That's the key element. And actually, in a previous episode for the ITT, I actually said that was the wrong choice, and I said that was quite bizarre, but I've come to realize that actually that's the most optimal unit to play it on. So shout out to the Polish player on their team that was running that, where I brazenly said that it was an incorrect choice, but it's definitely correct. Then I had 2 units of 3 armored sentinels. I had 1 scout sentinel. I had 3 units of 3 mortars, and then I also had 2 Lehman Russes, 1 with no sponsons, and 1 with another pair of plasma sponsons as well. Oh, and I had a Chimera with flamers as well. Yeah.
Lovely. Nice list. Very well balanced. Heavy on infantry compared to where you kind of started off as well.
Yeah. It was, I think, my philosophy, and my philosophy with a lot of list building, and I think, you and I, the Fate Skimmer versus the Rhino is a good example here, is I like to have answers to everything, and I like to just construct and play lists that if I just play perfectly, that my opponent won't be able to break me, and I'll have the 10-15% edge to win over any scenario. So well-rounded list is something that I really enjoy, and ultimately I'd always just end up at the end of the day with the list.
Oh, I love that, and there's loads of room for skill expression as well in this list, and I have a feeling that this kind of archetype is probably the direction people will start moving in rather than just spamming Lehman Russes.
Yeah.
And I think this is very, very powerful, but it does put demand on you as a player to play this correctly.
Yeah. I think as just a side point before we go into the games, I think there's a lot of chat on the internet around Astra Militarum, how deep or shallow the book is, how deep or shallow the player expression is, and I think both of those are I actually think the book is quite deep and wide, and I think the player expression availability for the army is quite large. So I explained on Zach's podcast is that I think the army's got quite a lot of reach in terms of it's got the potential to win super majors and win the largest tournaments. However, it is actually quite player skill demanding because it's quite unforgiving, and if you make mistakes early on, they can really punish you later on in the game because you don't have the most amount of flexibility with your army. There are pieces that are quite static, so adding the dynamic pieces into the army with the infantry chimeras was a part of how I wanted to get around the inflexibility, quote, air quote, inflexibility of the army as the secondary plays out as well, yeah. But the army's obviously got amazing secondaries as well. Just for the games ahead, I took inflexible command and boots on the ground every single game.
Oh.
And then my only decision points were R&D, retrieve data versus banners for all my games.
Oh, fantastic. Nice. That simplifies that side of things, and that's a sign of good list design. Powerful secondaries as well. So, Dave, going into this event, what was your kind of target? What were you aiming for with it?
Yeah, I mean, I think, probably, a nice 5-0 would have been good, but it was the second tournament I had with it in real life, and the second tournament is always better than the first in real life tournament.
Mm-hmm.
Like we had the ITT, and it's a bit of a warm up, so to speak. Obviously, we played primarily on TTS, but I found that after I play the army in real life at a tournament, I reflect on a lot of things a lot differently from only just playing on TTS.
Mm-hmm.
Is that the two complement each other quite well there, but I think as we'll go into later, there are some factors that have changed in our Warhammer lives recently that made me want to compete well and place well. But I've said this before: whether or not I placed well or high, I just wanted to play well. So I wanted to walk in and walk out with my head held high. That I didn't make huge play mistakes. I was playing to the best of my ability, playing in a way that everyone was enjoying the game. And everyone was having a positive time in the game. So if I achieved all those three things, then winning is kind of going to be a consequence of me playing well, hopefully. And if it isn't, then perhaps I wasn't going to win the game in the first place.
Yeah, so be it. And let's kind of jump into your games now. The first mission you were playing on is Secure Missing Artifacts, which is the moving an objective mission. You're playing the mirror match.
Yeah. Oh man, I get the mirror match around. So I'm going to go a little bit deep on this one because the Gardner Match I think is going to be quite interesting for a lot of people. Mm-hmm. In short, the Gardner Match heavily favors the person who goes first. There's absolutely no denying that. And the primary reason why is because you have the ability to screen out your opponent's Cassicans from your army by moving or remain vigilant plus advancing your Arcadia shock troops. And you have the first hit with your mortars. Now, mortars are absolutely crucial in the matchup because on UKTC terrain, you primarily hide your mortars in the L, and the big L at the back of the board. And what you can take two decision points to me. I think you can shoot your opponent's mortars to reduce their ability to shoot your troops, or you can go straight for their troops. Now, the reason you might want to go for their troops is because actually reducing the boots on the ground secondary is a really viable strategy, and reducing the amount of chaff you have to just hold objectives, raise banners, move, block, tag, and shoot is really, really good as well. So it's a tough one if you can if your opponent backlines their mortars and you can't shoot them, or do you shoot the mortars in the infantry, it's really maybe just me, but there's a lot of nuance there. And going second, I was already on the back foot because my opponent was able to put 4 rerolls to hit and wound on one of their mortars and kill 1.5 of my mortar squads.
Mm-hmm.
So on the back foot, but the thing my opponent didn't have was he didn't have the redeploy warlord trait. So that was a bit of a list design error that we had a chat about afterwards, and I explained kind of the differences between if you don't have the redeploy warlord trait, you can't posture aggressively and then take advantage of a first turn, and you can't posture defensively to take advantage of a second turn. You have to be somewhere in between that never favors going first or second, so then you have to gamble. And my opponent actually in this game did gamble. He put everything on the line. Well, not everything, but a lot of tanks on the line. And I, after having played this corner angular deployment mission before, knew that if I deployed everything very defensively, he wouldn't get to shoot me if he goes first anyway. So I was fully prepared to go second. I did go second. He hit my mortars, but I was able to get a huge turn off and kill a lot of his army, utilizing all my Cassicans to their fullest extent, my armored sentinels, and yeah, it was a bit of a tough situation for him because he had the Vanquisher battle cannon, and I was really aware that the Vanquisher battle cannon can shoot on death into a Lehman Russ,
Mm-hmm.
which is really powerful. So one thing I was really aware of is shoot the Vanquisher battle cannon last, so that it can't shoot on death into anything that hasn't activated. So a lot of nuance in the list. It's a bit of a tick for tack, so to speak, but it was a nice round one.
Yeah, well played. So yeah, you managed to take the mirror out, even going second, and you move into round 2 here against Joshua Cowlard. Very similar name to you in a way. And this was on Data's Cry Salvage, which is the 4 objectives across the middle. It's a whole 2 for 4 points mission.
Yeah.
This one's a swingy one as well, isn't it?
It's definitely a swingy one. So my opponent's playing Orcs Goths, triple kill rig, and basically just flat out pressure. Now, I think this is a common thing that happened to me in a lot of my games, is because my secondaries are so good, and I ended up going second in almost every one of my games here. My opponents just made the decision to jam everything into me, and basically said, I'm going to jam everything into you. If I survive, I'm going to try and stat check and pull off all your primary and tag everything. And I think that's probably so all of my opponents had played against Guard in a couple of games, and they said they'd actually beaten Guard. And I suspected that strategy had perhaps worked against Guard lists that were a little bit less rounded and didn't have the options to dig them out.
Mm-hmm.
So I knew one of my best pieces here was the Sentinels. The Sentinels are amazing against armies that are trying to jam you in melee because their base sizes are so large, you can actually block up paths in your deployment zone so that they struggle to push past your Sentinels and tag everything behind. You use them as a bit of a brick wall. You can use the KDA command squad like that as well because it's basically unkillable. And then you can fall back and shoot with those units. So that's basically what I did. My opponent decided to jam into me turn 1, triple kill rig, everything about 4 inches away from my deployment zone. However, as we chatted after the game, I think he made the mistake of not calling the WAG turn 1.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this would have given him a 5-buff invulnerable, which against all of my plasma russes and, well, an army that has arguably 800 points of plasma, perhaps would have allowed him the opportunity to spike a lot of saves.
Mm-hmm.
However, what I ended up doing was sequencing my attack sequences correctly and Barbican keying in the right spot so that even if his transports exploded and careened and emergency disembarked or embarked or disembarked or emergency disembarked in any angle of the kill rigs I shot, I had Barbican Key Cassican looking at everything on the board. So I knew that I had solved the problem of a one-phase army going against transports and that I could pop them in and kill what was inside. So I was able to kill about 800 points of his army on turn 1, on my turn 1 on the crackback. And then he obviously called the WAG, gummed me up in combat a lot. However, I think with a desperate breakout and then my follow-up, I was able to activate the rest of my units and basically pull off the game in, sort of 2 turns, but we played out the rest of the game. But he was kind of stuck in the back half of the board there for a large part, yeah.
Okay, yeah, really interesting. So this is another game where your counter-attack to someone who's gone first has been quite devastating.
Yeah.
And sometimes that can decide the game completely. So, okay, round 2, Dave, you're off to a good start. And now you move on to round 3. You're playing against Daniel Toombs, who has a Tau list. Oh, get to see a bit of Tau. Fantastic.
Yeah.
And this is on Conversion, which is the map which has had a change in terrain format here.
Yeah.
To be much more defensive within the deployment zone. The angles are cut out a lot more. How did it go?
So we'll give you guys a bit of a hot take here, and that's that Vik absolutely crushed me on this map when I was playing a list that was a lot less well-rounded, right?
Yeah.
And I think this map is very complex. It has a lot going on it, especially if you're playing an army that doesn't have, small obsec units that can hide in the ruins, right? Like if you've got that, it's quite easy to play.
You don't have any of those, right, Dave?
I don't have any of those, so... So the one thing I learned about this map, I actually went first this game, which was very good for me here.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I learned about this map is that it's very the lines of sight are very deceptive onto the objectives that are in no man's land.
Mm-hmm.
What I mean by that is you can actually hide a Lehman Russ behind the small ruin, and it's very difficult from the deployment zone to see the units behind that small ruin.
Mm-hmm.
And you think like even a Lehman Russ with plasma sponsons can easily hide behind that, and your opponent will have to come right into a pretty extreme angle to shoot it, and then clear off that objective. If they can't do that, they need to put units on the objective and be in melee with you. So I'd learned that the hard way a couple of games, and
okay.
The reason why I think I practice on the hardest missions is that for exact scenarios like this, I don't like to roll random missions or anything like that. I just like to say what's the mission that's really hard for me, so I can at least improve on that one. Because easy missions, they play themselves out, so to speak. What I did was I advanced up. I tucked everything into the ruins, and I tucked my Lehman Russ with no sponsons into the side of the ruin as well. And this Lehman Russ with no sponsons is specifically designed to operate on some of these situations. So it has a smaller profile, so you can't actually see it anywhere near as easy. So 10 guardsmen, Lehman Russ. And my opponent was in a bit of a tricky situation from there, because after I had shelled off all of his Kroot with my mortars, he was quite stuck in his deployment zone, because if he came out, I shoot him with everything. And then if he didn't screen my Kaskin properly, I get to shoot him. Now, my opponent made a little bit of a play error. He didn't see that he probably could have hit one commander in a spot that could have blocked my key. And I managed to get a key against his Crisis Squad and 2 Riptides. Now, I didn't kill any of them, and that's absolutely fine. I did, I think I killed 1 suit and did 8 damage to both Riptides. Now, he can obviously top bracket, but I thought if I get any point to key him here, because the deployment zones are so closed in and the lines of sight are so difficult on this board, I have to take it. And after that, I just sat back for quite a few turns and knew that he had to get decisive action at the end of the game, where he would actually have to be on the objectives regardless, and I could clean him up after that. So that was a really fun game, because it translated a lot of ideas about Tau that I'd struggled with in the past, and I just kind of knew that I just understood the technical nuance of the matchup a lot more. So it was nice to put something into practice. When you theorize something, you can put it into practice.
Yeah, for sure. What did you think about the in general? What do you think about Tau sitting in this meta?
I think I definitely still think they've got play. Now, my opponent was a lovely guy, albeit he had a legal list because he was playing 2 commanders plus Shadow Sun. But irrespective of that, the Riptides, I still feel like they are quite good. I feel like Riptides into Dark Angels Terminators have maybe got a good profile as well, right? So
yeah, correct.
It's difficult to say, really. Guard do feel quite good against them, because you can mortar the chaff, and then if it was any other mission, I would have had an easier key to shoot him as well. So tough, isn't it? Really
tough one. Yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of creativity which needs to come from Tau players.
My opponent played the Sunshark Bomber actually, which was quite good. He slow rolled it. He had 2 Sunshark Bombers, sorry.
He did.
So they were actually quite reasonable,
I mean, the output is very high. It's just obviously the time at which they come in is awkward. But okay, fine, Dave. So you're smashing it 3-0 on day 1, and moving into day 2, and you're playing against a very solid player here, Tom Moynihan, who has brought Emperor's Chosen Custodies for you.
Yeah, and so Tom Moynihan is part of the Tryhard Discord as well. So we were chatting in the Southampton GT beforehand. He said, "Oh, I'm going to put my dice in the oven to cook them up a little bit." So Tom's played Custodes for a long time actually, and Custodes is something in the back of my head I'm always a little bit scared to play against because, at the end of the day it can be a bit swingy, right? They can tag you up and they can roll a lot of 4-ups. They can turn off your rerolls. So I actually think Custodes are not a bad army for a singles player right now. If you are a Custodes player out there, I think the Emperor's Chosen list is still really good. Got a lot of legs to it. And I was quite scared of him going into the Qatar where he could stop me from falling back, actually. That's really powerful. And he's got the Venatari there as well. So it's tighter conviction. So he can put a lot of small units in forward-staged objectives. And then he can actually tag me. So I was really worried about that, actually. So I deploy my Russes very far back, knowing that if I go second, he jams me. I've got enough to go. And this is why I said before the common theme was that I think he knew going first. Well, he did roll to go first here. I would have so much points advantage going second with banners and the end of point scoring for tighter conviction that he would be in an almost lost position if I played well to begin with, right?
Yep, makes sense.
And that's a common theme that happened, I think, and he decided to go for it. Now I think my damage output surprised him a little bit because he put 3 bikes right on the side of the board, 3 bikes right on the side of the board, and his bike captain there. Now I was able and brought the 2 Calades grab tanks out. He killed a Lehman Russ with everything, killed my Chimera, killed the Kaskin in the Chimera, so I'm down a Lehman Russ, Chimera, and one of my Kaskin units. Obviously not the Barbican Key unit. And it was about a 30-minute turn there, and I was just like, "It's all right, David. Just relax. You'll get your turn to shoot in a second. Just
your time is coming.
Just be patient. The board state will look a bit different after. He's had a whole turn. You haven't had a turn yet. Just the board state will be different after you have your turn." And so, yeah, of course, I had to play this next turn really, really well, and Barbican Key my Kaskin into a unit, strung out into my advanced Finial unit to make sure he couldn't get any feel no pains. One thing I really enjoy about this army is that I really enjoy all the nuances of optimizing your weapon outputs. If models are on different saves, if they're on different wounds profiles, sequencing all your weapons correctly to get the maximum amount of utility out of them. Maybe it's a bit nerdy, but that's something that I think I'm quite good at, and I quite enjoy that.
It's your power.
I can really line up everything, so I hit 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 right in a sequence where it's kind of almost optimal to kill the most amount of stuff. So I ended up picking up 3 of his bikes, and then I also picked up his bike captain as well. So I also picked up a grav tank as well. So he lost about 700-ish points on the crackback, which was a common theme, and that still enabled him to play the game though, because it was tighter conviction. I didn't put myself in a position where I could defend my objectives very well because I was backlined and focused on not getting tagged and dealing the damage. So he was able to knock me off primaries here and there, but after my second turn, I played more aggressive, and the units that he had for behind enemy lines, I was able to springboard off and utilize the movement to bring my army out. So that's a tip, I think, guys. If you are putting something in front of a guard army against a good player, they do have the potential to shoot everything else, shoot that unit a little bit, and then charge it with everything, kill it in melee, and then move their army, which is almost like you strike and fade your entire army after shooting. So something to consider as well, yeah. Okay. But it was a good game.
Fantastic, yeah. No, I mean, again, another one of your counter-attack wins here.
Yeah.
Working out quite well for you going second in a way with these. And moving on to round 5, starting to ramp up a little bit, you play against Ewan, who is always near the top of the tournaments, and he was running an extremely interesting Chaos Demons list.
Yeah, so Ewan and I have played, I think, a couple of times by now, actually. He's a super lovely guy, and if you're a regular on UKTC, you'll know he's always up there, man.
Yeah, he is.
Very consistent. I think he 4-1s almost every tournament he goes to. So he's playing Demons, which I have quite a bit of knowledge of, so that's good going into it. He's playing Disciples of Be'lakor. and his list was actually quite good. I think on paper I wouldn't have thought a list like this is good, but with the recent demon changes, points drops on a lot of the units he was playing. It was actually some of them were surprisingly good. So I think one of the standout units was actually the Beast of Nurgle. That thing has a lot of damage in melee, and it also has a stratagem where if you fail morale within 6 inches of it, I think they pick a unit, and if you fail morale within 6 inches of with that unit of the Beast of Nurgle, they can regenerate an entire Beast of Nurgle, which is really powerful because they also naturally regenerate all their wounds, and they deal like tons of mortal wounds when they attack as well. So to me, that was kind of the standout unit for his army.
Okay, very interesting. Fair enough.
Yeah. The thing about his army was he had a very big footprint. Now, I know we've just talked about me counterattacking and winning my games, but I think in all of those games, if I went first, it would have been even more devastating. So Ewan's army had a big footprint. He knew the only way for him to win, more or less, on this mission, which was a very unfortunate mission for him, it was the bomb mission, with one objective in the open, which is obviously insanely good for my army. He knew that he needed to go on the line and jam, and I got another one against me. On the line jam, can't get first again. So I had the job of cleaning up 15. I think it was like 14 or 15 fiends. I killed just an insane. I think I might have killed another 700 or 800 points again, using my Kassakin unit again, of course. But I didn't actually play this. I kind of underestimated my damage output, and I exposed a Kassakin unit that actually didn't end up shooting anything, and he kind of counteracted and killed that with flamers. So although he had jammed and I was in a great spot, I couldn't kill Be'lakor at all. Actually, my army just doesn't kill Be'lakor. The Leman Russes are super unreliable into him, and more so, I decided not to. So the game kind of goes: he jams me, I counter punch. I have solid defensive walls with the Sentinels where he can't tag everything. He gums me up in combat with his Beast of Nurgles for a little bit. I slowly managed to get out of combat, and I think he also had something where he can prevent me from falling back on a 4-up with the Beast of Nurgle.
Oh, nice. Okay, yeah. There's a lot in there.
That was a bit of a shocker. He didn't. It's either a 4-up or you roll off or something like that. But he lost it. So I managed to fall back, which was nice. Between the ability to fall back and shoot and fall back and charge and maneuver my army again with the orders, I was able to kind of dispatch him. Once again, a lovely game. There was some points there where Remain Vigilant is obviously super powerful against demons, so he actually started almost everything on the board because Remain Vigilant means you can't deep strike within 12 inches of almost 50% of my
order,
army.
right?
Yeah, exactly. So and you can splash it to your army, so that's a really big, powerful part against demons, and obviously the mortars are just really good against them too because it's indirect, but they still have the demon save, so they're just super relevant the entire game as well.
That's a nuts order for the Codex to have, by the way. Just going to put that out there. That completely shuts down GSC and demons, doesn't it?
Yeah, yeah. So, on a side point, I think I said this in the previous episode as well, is that the thing that feels stupid about the Guard Codex is it has some combinations that blank entire armies, and it's got some combinations that are that just don't exist. So it doesn't have fast attacking melee, but instead it has insane orders and mortars. So it feels very okay, on one hand this is amazing, and on the other hand it's well, I don't really have any melee options.
Yeah, so there's a single opening and weakness, guys, to be exploited, which is that there's no fast moving infantry melee, which is a very noticeable weakness. So you've done 5-0, so now you've scored enough battle points because you've got very high scores across every game. So this is the end of the normal tournament, guys, for any of the UKTC ones, and then there's a cut to the top 4 from here, who will then play 2 more rounds, a semi-finals and a finals, to determine the winner of the tournament, and that's how the Super Major format works. So you went into the top 4 with so who else is in the top 4?
So there was me. And then Rob, who I ended up playing against, who was playing Leagues of Photon. And then there was Ed Watts from Savage Submariners playing World Eaters, and then Manny Cheema. So Manny played Ed, and I played Rob.
Awesome. Okay, so you were into Votan here, which Actually, it's probably the best draw for you, I think, potentially, out of these four. So how did this game go? Actually, his list is very interesting. Do you mind if I just say what his list is quickly?
Of course, yeah.
It's because this is the list with no Hecaton land fortresses. And it is Ymir still, so he gets plus 4 inches of range, and he gets a stratagem to do mortal wounds with beams. He has an Iron Master and a High Call. He has 2 units of 10 Heartkin Warriors. He has 2 units of bikes, no, 3 units of bikes, all max size, so 6-man bikes. 1 unit of Thunderkin, and then in the middle, the interesting bit is that he has 3 small units of Hearthguard with Volkite Disintegrators. Yeah. Vulcanite. Oh, they're called Vulcanite for Vulcanite. Interesting. So it's a really different kind of list design, and my understanding is that your opponent Rob went into the game quite confident against Imperial Guard.
Yeah. You know, he said he'd played against Guard quite a few times, and he'd won, I think, all of his games. Now, so Rob and I did chat before the finals. It was actually Rob's first big tournament, and Rob was like, you know, I'm just happy to be here, and I think he knew kind of who I was and kind of the level, and he said, you know what, you know, he's like, I don't think I'm going to win, but you know, X, Y, and Z, and I said, and I've said this to a lot of people before. I just said, Rob, you know, my models can't do anything that anyone else's models can't do. I still have to play by the rules of the game. You know, if you believe that you can never beat me here, then you never will be able to beat me. So I think it's important that you go into this game with the mindset that you can win this game. And I think he was grateful for that, because I think I could have just said, yeah, no, you got no chance, mate. But I like to see, you know, I used to be in that position sometimes, so I like to kind of tell people, you know, stay in the game. You know, let's have a good game, let's fight. Otherwise, it's going to be, you know, you're going to regret not putting your best effort forward.
For sure. Super insightful. And yeah, okay. So what was the kind of flow of the game here, Dave?
So this was a very similar game to all the games I've played.
Did he go first?
So, Rob went first, and trust me, if I went first this game, oh, man. Rob's footprint is quite large. And what I'd done is I put my scout sentinels so that he couldn't pre-game move into the only ruin where he could hide. That wasn't in his deployment zone. So, yeah, Rob went first, and Rob knew his only chance it was the Scouring guys, so probably a very good mission for me, but if I face Manny Cheema on this mission, I almost 100% lose, because he has Stubborn Defiance for 15 there. But Rob goes first, jams every single bite unit into me, and teleports the Terminators 4 rerolls to hit. He actually played very tight, he played really well. He shot into the hit. The big mistake he made was that he shot into my Sentinels, and Sentinels, for the large part, are a bit of a damage magnet, because I can -1 damage, and I did -1 damage when he shot all the 2 damage from 1 unit of bikes into it, but then he split and then didn't shoot into it again, so that was well played by him. But they are a bit, you know, their wounds profile for how much they cost and their defensive profile is very, very good. So they're not really the thing you want to be shooting, although they were the only kind of thing I did show him, in all fairness to him. So he jams, hits, and only ends up killing he leaves the tank on 1 wound with his Volkites, where I failed like every single save on 3-ups.
Okay.
And he kills about 3 Sentinels, I think, and then maybe a unit of 10 Guardsmen. I got a tank on 1 HP. And then, lo and behold, I'm back in the situation again where I have to sequence everything perfectly and make sure I've got redundancy on all the angles. All my weapon profiles are done. And yeah, I ended up picking up all 18 bikes in 1 turn. And then I tri-pinned his Volkite Terminators that were on the corner of the board with one of my Kasrkin units. And we had a little bit of a funny thing where he had two guys, but one of them was against the board edge. And then I failed morale and failed a model, and I realized that I could still tri-pin him because his model couldn't move because it was up against the board edge. So the board edge was like the 3rd model there.
Nice. Okay, lovely. Yeah, this is the little bit of an issue with Votann, to be honest. That they're deceptively fragile. Like the bikes are incredibly fragile.
The Kasrkin are probably the best bike shredder in existence, I would say. You don't get to reroll to wound, but when you reroll all hits and auto win on 5-up at AP 2 damage 1, then they have to take all the mortals, and they're still taking about 8 saves. So it's like you kill like 3.5 bikes per split that you do.
Yeah, and honestly, anything kills them. It's just
Yeah.
they're huge, so you can't hide them, and they're fragile, and they're also very easy to stop from doing what the opponent wants them to do, because you either just block their pre-game move or you sacrifice a unit to stop them touching the ruin and shooting through it. It's not very complicated, and I think people massively overrate Votan. Still.
Do you think, though, here's a question, though, Vic. Do you think that this list is better than the 2 Hecaton Land Fortress list?
I think it's probably a very equal power level, to be honest. The bikes probably are kind of the most versatile output unit, more than a Hecaton Land Fortress, but the durability is so incredibly low.
Yeah.
It's hard to tell, and sometimes building like this, where you just go 3 units of max bikes and you just have an Alpha Strike option, can just simplify a lot of games for you.
Yep.
But as soon as you hit a good player who knows what they're doing, Alpha Strike lists start to fall apart because people know that there are counters to it.
Exactly.
But it's only very experienced players who can control an Alpha Strike. I think I discussed that in the previous episode, that it's one of the most defining features of people who have a lot of success in competitive 40k is the ability to know how to avoid losing to an Alpha Strike.
Yeah. Yeah, it's one of the skills that you develop over time, really, I think. And one of those skills is actually just saying, I'm just going to completely sacrifice this unit.
Yeah,
because,
exactly.
You know, that's right. Because if I don't do that and he goes first and blah, 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 then I'm in a bad situation. So if it's 10 guardsmen, it's 10 guardsmen. If it's a scout sentinel, it's a scout sentinel. Right?
Exactly. And the thing is, as you get better with it, so I remember my development was, there's an army which is going to beat me if it gets first turn. I'm going to put this unit here because I think it's going to stop this from happening, but I've actually messed it up and there's still a space in which I die. And then that slowly progressed to, okay, I'm going to like build into my list 3 or 4 units that block out an Alpha Strike and allow me to survive, and I can still play the game.
Yeah.
And then it transitions to, what is the bare minimum number of resources I can give up to survive this Alpha Strike? And then it transitions to, I'm using the bare number of resources and my counter punch is too effective for the opponent to actually carry on with the game. So they double guess their Alpha Strike and don't do it.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. No, you're 100% spot on. And that's kind of the same thing with the Lehman Russes too. You know, you don't have too many so that you don't get alpha struck and you can't hide them. But you've got just enough so that you can hide them, turn corners, and then crack them really hard if they come at you.
Yeah, so actually, even though they got an Alpha Strike off, you win on attrition and resources, which is...
Exactly.
Okay, cool. That's my rant over.
I've had so much this episode.
This is awesome, Dave. So, in the other semi-final game, Ed Watts has actually joined Glasshammer now. So Manny and Ed Watts are teammates, and Ed is an awesome player, and I'm so happy that he managed to go 5-0 and get through to this. He's playing a World Eaters army, and Manny did manage to win this game. It was quite a close game. There's about 20 points in it. Yeah. And that means that the final is set up to be Manny Cheema on Dark Angels versus the mighty David Gaylard on his Astra Militarum.
Yeah. So, guys, just for context, and I know we've got a lot of viewers overseas and stuff like that, or listeners overseas. So Manny and I have met many times, whether it's early in tournaments, deep in tournaments, and Manny is the most singular person that has the highest winning record against me personally. I don't think there are many people who have, over multiple games, got a positive win rate against me. And Manny's consistently been the person. I think I was 0-5 against him, maybe 0-4, maybe 0-5. One of them was the very first tournament I literally ever played. So, I think it's 0-4 realistically in games. And a lot of these games were in the finals. Here we are again. So, I'm never confident going into Manny Cheema because he's arguably the best player in the UK. He plays the game full time, which is a huge benefit, of course, and he's an incredibly skilled player, and he understands the game through a lens which I haven't been able to develop into yet, as I came to realize kind of throughout the game. But I think if it was me or Nassim Fouchain versus Manny, none of that would have been a complete surprise, I think. But it really was the meeting of the two juggernauts, not only list-wise, but in addition, because of the history that Manny and I have had competing against one another as well, right?
Yeah, definitely. Like, this is quite an anticipated game, and I'm glad you guys met only in the final round.
Yeah.
So going into this game, I mean, this is a game which you had focused on and practiced for and considered before you'd come into the tournament.
Yeah.
And now you're there at the finals. What are you thinking as you're going in?
I was fortunate enough to have a call with one of my teammates, Yoko, just talking through the secondaries. You know, I was talking to our other teammates, and there was a big decision around: do I take banners, or do I take retrieve Nuckman data? And we made the decision to go with retrieve Nuckman data, which was a really, really good call. And the reason why it was a good call is because Manny, and he after the game he knew it, and a couple of turns into the game he knew it as well. Manny made the mistake of reserving a lot of his attack bikes. In fact, he reserved all 3 units of 3 attack bikes. So if you guys don't know, Manny's list is basically 25 Terminators, 2 Talon Masters, 2 Speeders, 9 attack bikes, and their characters. It's an extremely good list. The best list in the game, to be honest. But he made the decision to reserve his attack bikes. And I think the reason he did this was because I didn't have the Alpha Strike potential of maybe Nassim Fushane's list with the Scout Sentinels. So I think he thought that he could have some level of dynamic play where he could get the first hit on me. He could deploy his attack bikes, from strat reserve, shoot my tanks, shoot his bolters at my chaff, and get the first punch on me. Which, when you think about it in theory, I think is a super valid point to come to. But in hindsight, I don't think he appropriately theorized or strategized how the game would play out in relation to specifically the new map design. Now, just in case anyone doesn't know, for secondaries, Manny took Oath of Moments, Behind Enemy Lines, and he also took Codex Warfare. Now, both Manny and I were hoping to low roll for the first turn so that we could go second. Obviously, Manny has Oath, and we talked about it before the game, and I said, look, obviously we have to take Oath, right? And he says, yep, I'm going to go for it. Going second with Oath of Moments is extremely powerful, so I knew right from the get-go that I was going to have really high-scoring secondaries, but also the primary differential, because Manny would basically have 15, 15, 15 on all his secondaries, and there's not realistically a lot of interaction I could do to prevent that.
Mm-hmm.
So the game starts. I've got 3 units in reserve. So I've got 3 units of shock troops in reserve. And these are the guys that really saved my bacon. So the thing about this map, guys, is that, and this is the thing I learned, right, and I talked about this right at the start, is that if you tuck your tanks in behind the objectives that are in the open on this map, the objectives in no man's land, just where they have this small ruin there, it may look like in person, from your perspective of the board, that it's very easy to get lines of sight on these big units behind the ruin. But when you flip the board around and you actually realize it's really hard to see into that one angle, Vic?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. The one on the objective in no man's land, right?
Yeah. Either of them. The one that's either closed, the one that's closed for you,
mm-hmm.
or open to your opponent. Yeah. Both of them, no matter where you stage there, if you tuck a unit into the closed one for you, it's very difficult to get a line of sight there. And if you just have something physically behind the ruin, it's very difficult to see from the angle of attack. So I ended up going first this game, and what I did was I said to myself, well, Manny, you've got no threats on the board. I'm just going to push everything and force you to have to come out, because otherwise I'm going to get 12s, and mm-hmm. that's where I'm going to get the primary differential. Mm-hmm. And that's what I did. I put everything out, not in the open. I tucked everything right on the backs of the boards and then tucked stuff in hard. And even put my Ogre in on the middle objective just so it forces them to come out.
Oh, boy. Okay.
Get in there. So Manny then kind of went, okay, he can stop me from getting the 12 by putting one Terminator in the middle, and then he also gets Oath of Moments there. So he mm-hmm. rolls a 4 to advance and manages to get his Terminator squad in the middle of the board on the middle objective to prevent me from getting the 12, and he scores Oath of Moments, so great move there. Mm-hmm. And then he strung out a unit of Terminators to get one OBSEC model through his Rights of War character to prevent me from getting a 12 on the other ruin. Mm-hmm. So this is where now turn 2 is where it all clicks, because what I realize is that I've blocked out one half of the board already from his strategic reserves coming in, and I'm hidden behind the ruin. So I'm like, that's great. What I realized is that my strategic reserves will always come in before his, and what I can do is, if I just plop 10 guardsmen on the other side of the board, then there's no way that he can that he can bring his bikes in there.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
I bring my 10 guardsmen on the opposite side of the board and string them out along the back edge of it. I do R&D, I get boots on the ground, and that's 5 points, and he can't bring his bikes in there. And I think this is kind of when he realized, once this clicked, we both kind of realized, like, okay, this game is going to play out a lot different than we thought, because what this essentially meant is that the bikes could only come in on one position, and it was in his deployment zone behind the ruin, and I left a tank there knowing that he could shoot it, and that's what happened. Brought his bikes in, shot it, and then I had all my army to crack back into the bikes and the Cascan bomb to split into everything else. And what kind of the theme of the game was that he kind of had to bleed off too many units throughout the game. He had to score oath moments behind enemy lines and prevent me from getting 12s, which meant that he was kind of sacrificing 3 units every single turn.
Yeah.
And for Dark Angels, even though he combat squatted all his units, is just a little bit too much, I think, especially if you have to do it from turn 1. There were a couple of great dice in the game, which was nice for a change, because I had some historically awful dice against Benny. There was one point where I killed his Talon Master with my mortars, which was nice. One was in direct line of sight with AP1 full rails hit and wound. I was lucky enough to get 16 shots on that one.
Tasty.
That was nice, yeah. The thing about the Dark Angels army is that even though I'm tabling it and killing it, it still scores points so well. Mm-hmm. Behind enemy lines is super hard. I literally, he did behind enemy lines turn 1 by moving one of his speeders twice, and then I said to myself, look, David, there's no way you can ever stop this. Do not commit any resources to trying to stop it, and focus on anything else you can interact with, because I can't interact with that at all. Between that and the hit and run that you can do with the Dark Angel strat, all this stuff flies and moves like 15, 16, 17 inches. So there was no way I could stop that. One of the turning points in the game too was that I realized he didn't actually have, and we kind of discovered this when we play tested the matchup, he was actually running out of weight of fire. So I started playing really aggressive with all of my just 10-man troops, because I'd killed one Talon Master and he only had 1 left, and then he didn't have many attack bikes left. So actually he couldn't actually just kill 30 guardsmen. So I was like, okay, you can't kill 30 guardsmen. Just start playing way more aggressively with them. It was a really good game. It was a really lovely game. Manny and I playing completely by intent, chatting about lots of things during the game. What do you think is optimal? What do you think is good here and stuff, which was really enjoyable to see. I think a lot of people just see the results at the end of the day, but they don't realize that you're in a sports hall at 11 o'clock at night with your midnight train to get home. So
yeah, absolutely, man. And it looks like you guys both played out your game, and you just had a little bit more control of the flow of the game here. Mm-hmm. And I think the result is reflective of that. And I think the result is also reflective of 2 very excellent competitors in the UK scene. So props to you both, and props to Manny for making it all the way to the finals, coming second. He's had an incredible start to the season. And now so have you, Dave.
Yeah, it's been good. It's been good. If I'm being honest, I don't think I'll be able to beat Manny on that same matchup, same list again. I don't think he'll make the same mistake. And I think I was very fortunate to have practice into very similar lists and good player skill, whereas he potentially hadn't had the practice into guard at that level, which swung things a lot. And of course, that's what makes a huge difference. That's the practice you put into it. But I don't think after that game I'll be able to win in a similar position again.
Fair enough, man. And that's a very humble way of looking at it, because I think that appreciates the level of player skill that Manny does have, which is exceptional. And, Manny's been a big part of my development as a player. Over time, I see more and more similarities with the way that I look at the game because of how he's influenced my game. Yeah. So props to Manny, and props to you, and props to Zach for running another great UKTC event. And I mean, we do have one other big topic to talk about, because you've mentioned a few teammates who are a little bit different to previous teammates that have been mentioned. Maybe let's hit a little bit of jazz music, and then we'll discuss a bit about Team Ignite. Welcome back again. So now we've finished talking about the Southampton Super Major, and we're going to be talking about our final topic. Normally we talk about the meta in this stage, but today we're going to talk about something a little bit different. And, I'm going to give a lot of context here because I want this to be really clear. And what has happened is that me and Dave have stepped out of Dice Down, and we're now playing for a team called Team Ignite. Now, that's not for any negative reasons. Dice Down has been a very important part of both of our developments as players. And what's happened is that we've had the discussion with everyone. We've come up with an idea on how we can continue to improve as players. And part of this is because a few of the players in Dice Down have not been as active. So we're trying to create a team that's a little bit more active in the competitive scene. And we thought we would be better off kind of doing this from scratch. So, Dave, does that sound about right?
No, you put it excellently. And Dice Down has been a family to both of us in so many ways. It's been an incredible surrounding for me to develop as a player. You know, I won my first major under Dice Down, won my first super major under Dice Down.
Mm-hmm.
You won your first super major under Dice Down, right?
Yeah, basically every event, because I've been there for a long time. So, so this is a really, really big decision. And I think the key part was all the guys were really understanding. And just because you're kind of moving to a different team does not mean that in this community you're no longer friends with the people in the previous team. So the community continues to grow. People become more and more aware of each other and close to each other. And, you know, it's still going to be awesome seeing everyone at events, and there's definitely no animosity or anything like that. But I want to focus the rest of the discussion on what your kind of, what your thoughts are and what your vision is with Team Ignite, Dave.
Yeah. Well, what I would say is that actually our teammate Brian Sipe played against Alex Pitford.
Oh, round one.
round one of Southampton. So my new teammate played against Alex Pitford, my old teammate, which was a fantastic game as well. They're both lovely guys. So just a hilarious moment. But yeah, I think, you know, for me, I think, you know, if this podcast is some kind of archive of our relationship and development as people with the game, I think it's fair to say that I've tried to reflect more about my relationship with the game, and for me, I wanted to be a part of a team that was just focused on the same areas that I was focused on. So one of our key values is our first foremost key value is just being good people. I think, you know,
Mm-hmm.
We've got myself, you, Jokkel Johansson, and Brian Sipe at the moment. All just playing the game the right way. We are playing the game to have fun, and we all of us play the game to just play our best. Like, you know, win or lose doesn't actually matter, and losing has become such a much more acceptable thing to me as of recent. And you know, winning is not. I don't define myself by winning anymore, which is such it's mentally it's a more healthier place to be in. And that's something that we hope to create. And actually, the reality is that you said this actually first. I got to give you credit. You're the one who said this. I think maybe a couple of months back. Is that if you just focus on playing better, and I think you said about this going into LBO. If you just focus on playing better and playing well every game, in the game in and of itself, actually winning becomes a more natural constant from that pattern of behavior.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, there were two kind of big philosophies over the past year, which I feel have rubbed off a little bit on you. And that is one of them. And the other one is that your happiness and enjoyment of the game is not connected to the outcome of the game. Yeah. It's connected to you continuing to develop as a player and enjoying both the community that you're part of and also the development of your player skill.
Yeah.
And kind of having what you just said as the first and foremost rule, which was also a very foremost rule in Dice Down, it has to be said.
Yeah, for sure.
Immediately creates a more positive community, and that's a big part of what we're doing here, as well as developing our player skill by collecting players with the right ethos and a very high level of competitiveness in the competitive scene.
Yeah, and fostering a family of our own, I suppose to say. Where we can have honest discussions with each other, have applied objective feedback around, strategic parts of the game, and be supportive of each other and wanting each other to succeed. Because there are some people on the team that I really wanted to see absolutely crush it this year, and I know they will. So I mean, that's going to be one of my main goals this year. Is not competing and winning tournaments. It's actually going to be growing the team and seeing other people in the team grow. Turning into a dad already.
Absolutely. Well, at the moment, Team Ignite is only 4 players, but hopefully continue to grow and hopefully manage to show a good showing in the competitive scene for the UK.
Yeah, no doubt. That's been it today, guys. Sorry if you're a fan of Vik's voice, you got a glass half empty today.
That was an awesome episode. It was good to run through, and congratulations again, Dave. Moving forward, I've got the Manchester GT. So you've been to a Super Major without me, and it's my turn now. In a couple of weeks' time, I'll be going to the Manchester GT.
Yes.
Hopefully sometime next week, maybe after list submission, I will kind of go through my list, what I'm running, and my thoughts and my plan going into it.
Yep, and I'll be the punching bag practice partner. So
it'll
be time for me to play a whole bunch of different random armies.
Amazing. And guys, thank you for joining us for this episode of 40k Fireside, and we will see you next time.
Thank you for listening to the 40k Fireside podcast. Vik and I hope you've enjoyed listening, and we greatly appreciate any feedback that you can provide after the show.